Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Innis Herald Podcast. My name is Yash, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Innis Herald, and your host for today. This is a very special episode, one that's been in the idea jar for quite a bit of time now. Last summer, there was a period of time when I got really obsessed with reading old issues of the Herald. As EIC, I had access to the physical archives of the issues from as far back as the 1960s. Reading the papers gave me a window into what life at Innis was like back then, what hot topics people were discussing, what kind of movies or books were trending, what did people wear, what did people eat, what did they choose to study. Every once in a while, I'd come across a really raunchy joke or a funny comment from the ICSS president and think that someone could say those exact words today and it wouldn't feel out of place at all. Reading these papers made me feel instantly connected to the Innisians from all those years ago. The orientation coordinators, the ICSS student leaders, the editors, and the film buffs were all as caffeine-dependent, confused, and chaotic as we are today. So, where are they now? Where did the Innisians that came before us end up? What are they doing today? What was the Innis like before the Innis we know today? To answer these questions and share some stories, we've called in a very special guest for today's episode. Sitting across from me is Mr. Briane Nasimok, a man of many talents and a proud Innis Alum. Briane graduated from Innis in 1973, which means this year he will be celebrating 50 years since his graduation. Since then, Briane has written for the Toronto Star, produced numerous TV shows, played roles in multiple films, and performed live comedy up on stage. He has a passion for storytelling and some hilarious anecdotes, which I hope he will share with us today. Welcome, Briane. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here in this lovely residence that was nothing like we had in the old days. It was more like a bus shelter. No, not really. But this is great. I owed a lot to Innis. I don't think that I would have developed as a person or developed a lot of my passions had it not been the chance to go to Innis. So anything I can do for the college other than give lots of money, because I don't have that, I'll give a little. I gave money this year. Oh, they gave me something called the Arbor Award, so I felt I had to give them something in return. When you get an award, please give money back is the motto that I have.
Well, 50 years since graduating, how does that feel? And
now I feel old. Now I feel, well, because I've freelanced all my life, I don't look at it that way. I look at the fact that I have an ex-wife. Maybe that's why I don't have the money. And she was a brilliant rhythm and blues singer. She would talk about the day that she retired. And if I had that talent, I would sing at malls. Mm-hmm. And I said to her, and my motto is, the day I retire is the day they close the box and I want a computer in case there's internet. So, yeah, I feel that I'm older, maybe wiser in some ways, still dumb in other ways. And as I said, looking back, it's a few of the people who, I went to college with, but doing something like I did, I was on the road a lot. I didn't have a lot of continuing relationships.
Right.
But the relationship with the college went away for a while and then came back again, I'd say 6-7 years ago. And when Ennis was here, he was really helpful in establishing relationships. And then God knows Charlie and I got to host a few events with him.
Right.
And it was quite funny because he didn't get me at first, I don't think. And we would spar on stage together. And then he started to get one up on me, which I enjoyed because of my years of performing. If you play a higher status character, which I do, because that's my natural status, although I'm low status too. We'll go over that one day. I'll do a seminar on those things. And then Charlie upped me. I know, okay, let him up you. Let him win, because the audience will love you more for letting him win than trying to go over him when he's got a natural win. So, I still don't think he understands me, but I hope he doesn't listen to this.
No, Charlie's wonderful, and we miss him. So I know you were telling stories while you were here at Innis College too. I know you mentioned you wrote for the Herald at one point.
I wrote for the Herald. I also wrote for the Varsity, and it was interesting because two people I wrote for the Varsity, who were the editors the second year I was here, both went on to write in the Globe and Mail and the Star, and Linda McQuaig is still writing a lot of stuff.
Oh, wow.
And my favorite thing for writing for the Varsity is when I would write things about either people I knew or myself, my name would be Ian Cognito. And I remember writing a review about a show that I did, and I misspelled my name purposely so people would know that I actually wrote it. But for the Herald, it was far more not covering any hard news like it was. It was more thoughts and inspiration, and I was very, very supportive of people understanding if you're in downtown Toronto, you don't have to go to Greek and Latin literature. Mm-hmm. Go to a movie. Go to a mall. We had pinball machines on Yonge Street. And I was around for about 10 years after that, and I could see how students were changing. It was getting ready for a job. But if you're in a liberal arts education, use this resource for your liberal arts. I mean, I made a movie. I wrote for the Herald and Varsity. I directed plays. I sat in. I demonstrated. I was in politics. I was the chugging champion.
Now that's an accomplishment.
Well, what happened in those days? At the end of the freshman week, there would be a rookie banquet where the new students and some of the staff and administration would go for dinner, and then they decided, let's have a chugging contest. Now, when I was in high school, I went to a place called Forest Hill Collegiate. I was not part of the in crowd, although people told me at the reunion, oh, you were funny. I didn't feel that way. I was bored. I mean, I got like 26 in Latin. We didn't talk it much at home. It was like, but in those days, there were not the options you have nowadays in high school. It was like you had to take English in grade 13, math, French, and one other subject. So I end up, I also have a story about flunking grade 12 because I went out on a date the night before with a woman I had a crush on television, but that's another story. It doesn't have anything to do with it. Well, it does in a sense because I flunked grade 12. I went to summer school. In grade 13, I did fairly poorly, so my marks were so bad. When I graduated, back then I couldn't even get into York. And all you needed was $600 and a pulse, I think. Well, at Forest Hill, they would make up, if you were going into the graduate class, they'd make up what students had done the year before. 62% went to University of Toronto for what was called Soc and Phil, sociology and philosophy. That was the one. 12% went to York. 2 died. They'd never mentioned community college. So I ended up taking a 2-year sabbatical at Seneca, where I started to develop. I actually made a short film because I thought I'd be in film. And then I took it to Los Angeles because when I used to skip high school in grade 12, I'd hang out with people at the CBC, and somebody was my mentor, and he moved down to Los Angeles and was producing the Andy Williams show, and he invited me to come down and stay with him, but then he divorced his wife, so I was at the Hollywood YMCA room 401, and nobody really wanted my little film, even though it had done well. So fairly bitter, I came back to Toronto to keep out of the workforce. I said, I should go to school because I didn't want to go to work at my uncle's sheet metal and roofing business. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then somebody told me about Innis College. They were accepting people like me. I went, really? And the registrar was a gentleman named David King, who, if you talk to anybody from there, just will tell you what a wonderful man he was. And he knew that I should be at Innis. It was a good match. And so that's where I came in, and I won the chugging contest. But because I'd been to Seneca, I was semi-pro when it came to drinking.
Right.
And I didn't I didn't like the taste of beer, so I'd drink it quickly. At the end of the night, I'd just nurse it and chug it. So for the next month or so, whenever I'd be at 63 St. George, because that's where our college was, people would refer to me and go, hey, champ, how are you? Hey, champ, let's go for a beer. So because Innis was parity, and I think it still is when it came to all the councils, and we were the only ones, I ran as the freshman member of the search committee for a principal named Peter Russell. And my motto was give champ a chance, vote Briane Nasimok. So people started to learn my name. And then and I got in second year I was vice president, and third year I lost the presidency by one vote. I think it was fixed. Anyways, so I got really involved with the college because I loved the idea of it. I loved the fact that we had a house.
Right.
We were the first place to have...
We're at the McDonald Mowat house.
Yes. Right? Yeah. We had a unisex washroom. We had the people's washroom on the first floor in 1971. We had just big common rooms to hang out in. We had, of course, the Innis cafeteria, one room. We were the first college to get a special liquor permit, and we'd have Friday night. Right. We'd have Labatt beer because they gave us a deal on it. So I wasn't here at the beginning, but I started to help develop where it was going. I think, and we also. It was a place where there were people who weren't Innis College people, but went, wait, this is better than St. Mike's, and just
still say that.
Yeah. It's the uniqueness of it, the ability that it allowed you to grow. We had the Innis Farm.
Oh, right. I want to hear more about the industry farm.
Well, really, when you think about having a retreat for university students. And we'd have meetings out there, and we'd have weekends away, and it was beneficial for social interaction, and a place just to get away from it. And we just schlep out there, and I think it was 6 or 7 times over the 3 years I was there. And what happened to it?
I'm not sure. I tried to go hunting for it, but I think it's been sold to someone else.
I'd find out about that. This should be a podcast. You should find out where that money went. It was just part of it. But the whole atmosphere was so different from any other college. I did UC Follies at UC, so I got involved with that because I knew people there.
Right.
I hung out a lot of Vic because of the Vic Music Club. I just took anything under the sun in first year, of course. And then second year, I went, I'm interested in writing. I'll be an English major. And within 3 weeks, I dropped 4 Englishes. Then I went on to I took a bunch of religions because they were interesting. We had religion and science fiction. We had religion and imaginative literature with a guy named Father David Bellier, who was the most interesting character, racist, you wouldn't believe, sexist, I think. I remember one day he called me over. He says, Brian, you're Jewish, aren't you? I said, yes. He says, well, you must know a bookie. I need a new bookie. Okay, there's a stereotype I hadn't heard before. It was characters too. And as I said, one of the fascinating things for me in my life, I have an analogy I use in one of my stories. And anyone who plays chess, I'm sorry I have to explain this to those people who don't. On a chessboard, you have a row of pawns who only can move one step at a time and straight forward. And if they get into they can move 2 at first, but that doesn't matter. But if they get into a fight, they can move at an angle. That's the only time.
Right.
But I think a lot of people, or most people, are like chess pieces on the back line. Castles moving in a straight line, north, south, east, west. Bishops moving on an angle, either staying always on color. The king moving 1 step at a time, and the queen moving whatever way she can. But for all of those pieces, if there's something in its way, if there's another piece blocking it of their own, stopping them, they can't go forward. I've always been a sort of a knight. I've had my eyes at something that seemed difficult to get to, like I'm not going to get there, but I've jumped over things to get there. So when I'm 10 years old, I go to what is now the Meridian Hall, which was the O'Keefe Center, which has gone through a number of names. And I knew one of my passions was performing. And I saw a musical called Oliver on the way to Broadway, and I said to my father, I want to tour with a musical, but more importantly, I want to be on the O'Keefe Center stage for some reason. The fact I had or have no talent wasn't going to stop me. My public school career included playing a boy. I was typecast in grade 1. Policeman number 2. A pirate. The wing commander. I never had a role. My character had a name. This is the kind of stuff. So I come to the U of T, and a friend of mine, Steve Schuster, who was the son of this famous Canadian comedian Frank Schuster from Wayne and Schuster, look it up. They were on a show called the Ed Sullivan Show, like more than any other group. Well, Steve got the rights to do UC Follies, this renowned variety show, which Wayne and Schuster had done, and also a guy named Lauren Lipowitz, whose middle name is Michaels. So Lauren Michaels, who created Saturday Night Live, this is where he got to start. So Steve brings me in to co-write and co-produce and perform in UC Follies. I'm going, oh, this is going to be good for my career.
So from no-name characters all the way.
Yes. It is so bad the show closes during dress rehearsal. I mean, at intermission, the producer comes backstage and goes, we're not putting this on in front of people.
Oh, wow.
But the music director had brought a friend of his to this dress rehearsal. He comes backstage, and he approaches me and asks me if I will be an extra, a supernumerary in operas. Now, these are the characters. There are characters on stage in the opera who don't sing. They, carry out food, carry out dead bodies, move tables and chairs. And I said, I don't like opera. Because my knowledge of opera was solely based on, like, Warner Brothers cartoons, The Bunny of Seville and Kilda Wabbit. But he said, well, we do perform on the O'Keefe Center stage.
Right.
I signed up. In the second year of university, I was in 3 operas. And I just really got involved with the company. In fact, being an extra was the lowest of the low. In the basement, we had many things in the basement of 63 St. George, including a smoking room and a silk screening room that I helped start. So we made up T-shirts, honorary extras T-shirts, and only for the extras. And so at the end of the first year, I gave out the Honor Extra of the Year award. In the second year, I gave out it again. And by the third year, I'm running an award show at the end of the opera company. This is how involved I was. But in third year at U of T, because you only had to do 3 in those years, I had so much time on my hand. There's the Edward Johnson Building has the opera school, and the opera school had a stage technology division. So I audited it while I was taking my full courses. I learned about building sets, props, costumes, stage managing. Now, a short story. I had a crush on one of the people in Aida, and I decided I'd have a party for the extras and invite some of the leads. And I had guts in those days. And so I invited her. One of my best friends, a stage manager, had a crush on another singer, and he invited her. My singer didn't show up. His singer did. Also, her husband showed up. So the extras kept her husband busy talking about his olive oil business. Well, the stage manager and the singer got to spend some time together. So I audited the stage technology course, and I got very friendly with the man who ran the opera company, Dr. Herman Geiger-Terrell. He actually came to a show I did at Vic, where I played a character and had a nice musical number. I thought, okay, he'll come and see how I can sing it. Maybe he'll move me up and I can do something in the opera. And my nickname in those days was King Farouk, because in Aida, and let's remember, this is the 70s, in Aida, I played a Nubian slave, and there were 40 of us Nubian slaves. 38 of us had to get into body makeup.
Right.
So my nickname is King Farouk. He comes at the end of the show to the side of the stage. The whole cast comes out, and he and his wife are there. I said, so Dr. Terrell, what do you think? He said, King Farouk, you sing loud but lousy. So I knew I had no future singing, not realizing that I had a future in stage managing, because he calls me. My job is supposed to be sports editor of the Varsity.
Mm-hmm.
I got that job. I got into trouble because when it was the end of the year and they were talking about all the football players, instead I covered a cricket game that was being played, and boy, did I get in trouble. So they were happy when instead of being sports editor, I took the job as assistant stage manager in the opera tour because my friend, the stage manager, got the singer pregnant and they couldn't go. So right from university, I go on the road for 3 years, not singing 287 times in operas and becoming Canada's foremost operatic mute. And that is all because of coming here and being involved in Innis and having the time to do what I wanted to do. I mean, if you trace it back, it's a path I could never have taken.
Right.
And that's because of the freedom that I had here to develop stuff like that. And, and because we weren't doing theater. We, of course, were the film, and I did 2 films while I was here. Yeah, 2 films while I was here. And so I think what people should be realizing, other than academically, is creating those memories.
Right.
You're in a situation that most people of my era weren't. Most people of my era thought that security was having a good job for life.
Mm-hmm.
When I was at YTV, I was always a freelancer. For some people, they might know of a show called Uh-Oh, where we dump messy goo on kids' heads, and I produced that, and NBA Dunk Street, and Santa Claus, a whole bunch of stuff. And so all of my life has been moving from job to job to job, which was looked down upon by my families, and I think for maybe a couple decades after that. Through my stepson and his friends, I realized you're a generation of realize you're going to be moving from passion to passion to passion. If you don't have a passion for something, get out of it unless you need that money because you have responsibilities.
Right.
And it's much more accepted. And also, I think losing grade 13, coming to university a year younger, may not be that good. That gap year might be more important.
Right.
Struggle is key. And I'm not an old man coming down, but everything is so instantaneous.
Mm-hmm.
I was working in Montreal. This is off topic for Innis, but you can edit, I'm sure. I'm working in Montreal doing stand-up comedy. And Howie Mandel comes into the club. And I'd worked with Howie a number of times. Before he made it famous in the States, he and I and a guy named Steve Brinder used to run around. We were the little Jew team of doing stuff. Howie comes into the club, it's a Thursday night, and says that he has to go on because there's a director there to see him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I knew I was a better host than a stand-up. So I said, Howie, take my spot. You be the feature, and I'll just be the host. So I go out and host and have fun, and Howie kills, of course. And I'm in the back with Evan Carter afterwards having a beverage. And Howie comes back to say he's been offered the lead role in a film the next summer, and the director wants to see me. I go out and talk to this guy, Les Rose, and I knew of his name in Canadian films, anybody who directs. And he says, he thought it was funny. I said, thank you. He said, I have a role for you. Now, in those days, I had a beard, and I looked kind of more Mideastern.
Uh-huh.
And he said he wanted me to play Sheikh Fauzi, an Arab oil sheikh. I said, oh, okay. He says, can I do an Arab accent? Now, I didn't realize, because I had only done some extra roles, I didn't realize you say yes to director. Yes, I can ride a horse. Yes, I'll eat pork. Yes, I can do that. I said, I don't know. He was going back to Toronto in a week, and I was back in Toronto in a week. Mm-hmm. He said, if I can learn an Arab accent, I've got the role. How do I learn an Arab accent? Oh, I go to the reference library, and they have a bunch of tapes. There are no tapes of a Mideast Arab accent. And I talked to the librarian. She phones her friend. Her friend's a lawyer. He's an Arab. I sit with him. I learn an Arab accent. I go to Malabar's. I get costumes. 2 days later, I'm at the Sutton Place Hotel knocking on the door. I buy Karl Brasek, and I got the part. And that next summer, I go to Montreal to be in this movie, which is going to be the hit. 680 screens across North America. And even though my first day, I made a huge faux pas by cutting myself and the director storming off the set, he says he's happy that he discovered me. And I'm thinking, okay, and it's opening the next summer. 2 nights before, I get a call from the wife of the writer. Now, I was much friendlier with the writer and his wife than the actors on set, because they were actors and I wasn't an actor, and you have to have a whole different approach to life, I think, as an actor, other than to be a comedian or improviser or storyteller. So Susan phones me Wednesday and I said she'd seen the movie, I shouldn't get my hopes up, and she's divorcing the writer. Not because of the movie.
Right.
So Friday I get 40 people to go to this cinema, and I make up these little certificates that said, I survived the opening of Gas, because the movie's called Gas. Now, the movie's based on an oil shortage after the oil shortage was over, so it didn't make any sense. And Howie was okay in it, and we had a guy named Sterling Hayden, who was this old 1940s, 50s actor who'd been blacklisted, who sat in his Winnebago and smoked hashish, and we'd go and visit him. It was so bad, I hid in Ottawa for a week until it went away. It lasted 2 weeks. The review was it shouldn't be held against me if I had a career in films.
Oh, wow.
It is not on the writer's resume. It's on his IMDb. But the top thing on his IMDb is Law and Order. The guy who created Law and Order. The first disaster that he wrote was this movie, Gas. So I was in LA 15 years ago, and I actually phoned Dick Wolf Productions to talk to Dick. They said, oh, he's in New York. Would you like to leave a message? Sure. I go, hello, this Sheikh Fauzi B. Fauzi. You do good. Hire me again, please. He has not phoned.
Right.
But, I mean, be prepared for failure. A lot of people are so insulated against failing, they don't try it. You don't understand success if you don't have it. And I did a show called Evening at the Improv. I had visions of the Tonight Show dancing in my head. I'm doing very well, and I get heckled. Had it been at a club, I would have used 2 words that I don't want to necessarily use on the podcast, but I delivered those very well. At Yuck Yucks, I deleted the sweetest F-O that you could imagine. But I just lost it, and I lost my chance for that. It just never saw the day of light. I used to have this regular, because I would host Sunday nights at Yuck Yucks, because I was like the second feature ever. Another convoluted way where I got there. And there's this guy named Roger, whose nickname was Mud, who'd come every Sunday and bring people. And he'd always heckle me, and I'd tell him to F-O, Mud. And this one week, he was worse than ever. And after about 5 times, I said to the audience, if he speaks again, join me. Let's stop him. I'll count to 3 and I'll tell him to F-O. So I go out to introduce the feature. He heckles me. I go, 1, 2, 3. The whole audience goes, F-O, Mud, using the full words. Old ladies were using the F word, Mud. So, but I wasn't prepared. I was dancing up there, and then all of a sudden I was brought down to the reality of, so I hate to put it this way, in a sense, because I know Howie, I know Jim Carrey, I know a few people who got into that level who couldn't handle it and who aren't themselves. I'm happy that no one really, I don't think, can come after me or out me for anything I've done in the past, because I'm not that famous.
Right.
I can be my character in the world, if you understand that. What was the question?
I just wanted to get you talking, and I think I succeeded.
I'll go back to Innis, because that's why I'm here. So when I came in, there was Robin Harris was the principal. And he was a really great guy. I mean, the first 3 weeks I'm there, he gets tickets for this show called The Me That Nobody Knows. And I get invited.
A theater show?
It was a theater, it was a musical that I've always wanted to produce,
right.
but it's kind of dated. It's set in a ghetto, and it's an all black and Hispanic, and it's just talking about their dreams and drugs. I think you can find. I did find the album on iTunes.
Right.
But the strange thing is, there's this. Let me take a step back, as I am a huge romantic. I fall in love with waitresses every day. Anyways, so Robin and I get very close. There's a couple people there who I've never seen before. And one's his daughter, Mary, who I'm completely enamored of, who's getting engaged and married. And God knows I tried my best there. And so Robin and I became great friends. He says, you're a lovely guy, but no, she's going to marry him. And that's when I got put on the search committee, and everyone talked about this Peter Russell guy. And so he actually got in, and it was Peter who was there for a majority of the time. Now, in those days, there were kind of factions. I hate to put it this way. There was... And I got in as vice president. David Newman was president, and it was great because we had so much say in what went on in the college. I mean, the awards committee. I was involved with the writing lab and the Herald, and we did some outings and we did demonstrations. Oh, I hadn't thought of this. So it's the homecoming parade.
Right. Okay.
Do we still do homecoming parades?
We have something of the sort.
Okay, so we had a float, and it was...
You wrote about that for the Herald as well, right?
Yes.
I read the piece.
Yes. And it was... We found a way to make a comment about the United States of America.
Right.
And on this, we had a giant map of Canada, and we had the president dressed up as Uncle Sam, and we had this inflatable punching bag. And at one point, he put the punching bag, which looked kind of phallic, through the map, and behind it we had a fire extinguisher that shot up in the air, and we got disqualified. So yeah, we very lefty, very out there, very we lit a lot of stuff like that. But so. I maybe pissed off some people because I really developed my character and my outgoing personality and figuring that I knew the world and could run it. So it was myself running against Mike Walker for president. And the district attorney officer liked Mike, I think, better than me. And as I said, I lost by one vote, but I don't know whose vote it was. Might be the district attorney officer. But because there was an opening on the executive as education commissioner, I think it was called in those days.
Right.
Because I had most of the executive on my side, because they were my people, like the vice president Richard Hall, I became that position, which was the writing laboratory and the awards and stuff like that. So even though at one point during the Canada-Russia series, I organized renting a television. And in those days, we had a huge front room with couches.
Right.
So we filled it with people, and everybody watched the Canada-Russia game in the afternoon on TV.
Kind of like a makeshift town hall.
Oh, yeah. Well, we had this was it. So there was this seemingly lift between, I called him Johnny Joe Walker, and me. And so Peter Russell could sense that. So he had a town hall meeting about what was wrong. Why was there this dissent? Right. So we're talking about this and that. I mean, it was more personality than anything. But then, no offense, Mike, you've since passed on, but no offense, he gets up and says, the problem is in the basement. Because in the basement, other than having our silk screening, because it was, wasn't much of a finished basement, that's where people would go and enjoy things that are now available almost every friggin' street corner in Toronto.
Right.
The smoking room. He said, well, people would go down to the smoking room and they wouldn't be offered a toke. And that really, I think, has been upsetting people. And mostly everyone just rolled their eyes. And we moved on to something very quickly. And then Peter calls me up to the office and says, is this true? I said, I think he's over-exaggerating. I think a couple people might go down there, but I'll check it out and let you know. So in those days, we had one major award, which is called the Acadia Award, which was $1,000, which is big in those days. Yeah. Big in those days. And it was a combination of studentship involvement and academics. And because of the course I was taking, I was a B pluses. I mean, I got 1C only because I had mononucleosis and didn't finish the course properly. I didn't care because it got, someone's going to look at that. Oh, here's a job. You got a C, I'm not hiring you. So
quite reassuring, actually.
Yeah. So there's a meeting of my committee, but I can't go because I know I'm up for that award. But I realized that I'd been talking to other people in the committee, and there was this woman who was really helpful for the writing lab who I thought should win one of the secondary awards. So I go up and I knock on the door, and I wait for their silence. I just don't want to say anything about anything else but Daryl. Oh, yeah, Daryl Freeway, should we do the aisle? Okay, thank you, goodbye. I go back downstairs. Mike Walker hears, I went up to the meeting. Knocks on the door. I want to tell you why I think I should win the Acadia Award, not Brian. So I got the award right away after that. And I was actually talking about this last night. So in those days, we had Convocation Hall, and then our reception was back at the house. I mean, the house is laid up. So in the back corner, there is what is the cafe, which is maybe can seats 12.
Right.
And Mike Fuzz, who was around for years and years, he ran it. And then my buddy Seymour Kanowitz, who became president, and I, we got a pinball machine in the back to make money. Mm-hmm. But we also found a way to take the back off the pinball machine to get free games, but we didn't tell people. Anyways, so then when you go out in the hall, to the left was the people's room, and you go farther along the hall, and there was something called the Boston Room. Bob Boston, who is still doing music, I got a note from him in Vancouver. Bob Boston was here in the early years. Lefty, folk singer, had a group called the String Band. That room had no couches. It had pillows.
Right.
You sat on the floor in that room. Sometimes we'd project in that room. And then on the right side, there was a classroom with couches and chairs where
right.
Joe Medchek did his film class. And then there was the main big room, which was double the space, which was the whole building and, right. and the entrance.
The main common room?
Yeah, the main common room. Then you go upstairs. There was offices on the second floor, and then on the third floor there were little rooms for classes and the writing lab. Mm-hmm. So, if you go in the house, you can see what it was, and that was it. And what would happen from time to time to time, if we were working late, there was the ICESS office, which is right next to the washroom, perfect
right. location.
If we were late, we would sleep over on the couches. Uh-huh. And Oswald, who was the night watchman, would come in at 6 a.m. and wake us up because the day shift was starting and send us to Hart House, and we'd swim and we'd have breakfast. And I also had a set of keys to that. I could come in and I would do rehearsals in the house. This is what it was like. It was,
It was very free.
Very free.
Right.
There was not much security there. I mean, even, we had houses plus Vlad, we had 707 and 709 Spadina.
Right, okay.
And I actually...
Is that where the fishbowl was?
There were two houses there, right. And I was on tour with the opera company. When I came back, I moved in the houses for the summer. And it was interesting when I left my mother and moved out, she cried and cried. And when I moved back, she cried and cried because she loved the freedom. But that was the freeness and the freedom of it.
Yeah.
And
Sorry, just make sure you're speaking.
Yep.
because Seymour was president and I was still involved, Trudeau the First, Pierre Elliott, one summer he suggested to students, if they couldn't find a job, travel across Canada. And he suggested places like us should set up tent cities.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a tent city behind SAC, because somehow I was involved with SAC unofficially. I went to meetings and I learned how to eat chopsticks because the rule was...
Wait, what's SAC again?
Student Administrative Council.
Okay, right.
The rule was when you went for Chinese food afterwards, you couldn't use a fork. So you had to learn how to use chopsticks. So by the second meeting, I had learned how to use chopsticks. So Seymour and I set up a tent city, and we invited people. And the administration of the University of Toronto was not happy about this. And we would stay in the student council building, the little observatory, and get food come in, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know if you know the name Brian Williams, who was a famous sportscaster.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Brian Williams' first job, almost as a student, was at Chum as a newsman. And he came, and we talked about it, and he gave me his card, said, phone me anytime there's anything happening. Sunday morning, 6 o'clock. And never before in the history of the University of Toronto had Metro cops come onto the campus. 6 o'clock in the morning, they come onto the campus, and I phoned Brian Williams and give him the scoop. And we ended up working together for 20 years doing sports stuff together. But the cops knocked down the tents and threw people off.
Right.
But, Seymour was not a Innis College student, but we would hold exhibitions of wrestling in one of the rooms, because wrestling was, it's maybe got big again, but it was really much bigger in those days. The real wrestling, not this stuff they do now. I did a sociology of wrestling on paper for Ian Curry.
Uh-huh.
And I talked about stereotypes and things like that, because when I was a kid, on Saturdays I'd go to my grandparents, and we'd have lunch, and we'd watch wrestling, and I learned Yiddish swear words as they yelled at it. And I got very involved with wrestling and the whole idea of it and how you played the stereotypes. So not only did I do the sociology of it, I interviewed wrestlers. I have pictures. I have one picture of the masked Yankee eating a hot dog through his mask, which I'm sure helped get me my 96 from Ian Curry. I mean, you were allowed to do those sort of things because people allowed you to do that. It was the kind of freer.
Mm-hmm.
People weren't, you really were, it's after the 60s, and people were going, find yourself, discover yourself.
Right.
Because, as I said, no one's going to look at, oh, you got a BA? What's your marks? Okay, here's a job. I'm going to step off because I'm going to cough. See, that's professional work. You don't cough into a microphone. I hope you all learned that today.
Thank you as well.
Yes, yes. But yeah, no. I forgot. I did varsity radio as well.
Okay.
And my favorite was I had to fill in as the color commentator for a U of T Brock Badgers hockey game.
Uh-huh.
And U of T was strong, and Brock was terrible. It was like 11-1, and I interviewed the guy who brought peanuts up into our broadcast booth. And that's why I never did a Brock Badgers game again, or any U of T. Oh, yeah, because I did U of T. But that's it. It was there. It was there for the picking. And you go, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this.
Right. And so one thing I noticed, and you probably mentioned as well, is a lot of the older issues of the Herald and just things happening during that time had a lot of not so subtle innuendos and unrestrained photographs and things like that. So did you ever get in trouble for any of that?
I don't think so, because the whole philosophy was you're learning.
Right.
I can remember once or twice some advice from David King. Robin Harris, didn't seem to care.
Okay,
And
right.
Peter Russell, I think the only advice would be from David King is, I did get some advice from somebody else. In the second and third year I was here, for some reason, I became the co-editor of the handbook that you gave to the students.
The new students?
Yeah, new students.
Right.
One was called Everyone's a Winner at the U of T.
Uh-huh.
And the WHA, there was a breakaway hockey league. They actually started to rent time at Varsity Arena, which pissed us all off. So we had a number of cards and fake things in there, other than having maps of all the areas around what you can do to not go to class.
Right.
And in those days, Bloor Street between Spadina and Bathurst was almost nothing but Hungarian restaurants.
Uh-huh.
We had like cutout playing cards. My uncle had a horse, Armbro Nick. We had all his stats in there. And the greatest thing we had there was a coupon that you could cut out to go to a free Toronto Toros game.
Uh-huh.
But it wasn't real.
Ah, right.
We got into trouble for that. There was a guy who used to own the Toronto Maple Leafs named Conn Smythe.
Okay.
Conn Smythe was involved with Bob Rumble, who has this place for the deaf up on Bayview Avenue. And he wanted to get some U of T land there. And because Seymour was president, and when I first met Seymour Kanowitz, he ran for something, and I was the campaign manager for his opposition.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided we both liked wrestling, and he won, so I forgot the other guy and became friendly with him. So we met with this Conn Smythe as the student representatives. And Conn Smythe wanted to buy some land, and he had to get some student approval of selling this land. And Conn went, Kanowitz, Nasimok, are you Jewish boys? Oh, you guys are doing well for Jewish boys. So we intimated somewhere in the yearbook that Conn Smythe may have been a little anti-Semitic, and we had to go through the yearbooks and scratch it out.
Ah, right.
So to answer the question, there was not any real censorship here, because I think they realized hard news. What hard news would you have of Innis? This was happening, that was happening. But if you're going to fill it with some things that people will use to inspire, to instigate, to make them think, to make them react.
Right.
No one's going to react to the fact that somebody, at Sid Smith found a coin.
Yeah, it needs to be interesting.
Yeah, it had to be interesting. And I think all through, I didn't ever want responsibility, but when anything had to be done or added, and I would do I was very aware of not being too out front and getting things because of who I was.
Right.
So I'd either write them under assumed names or not put a byline on them, because you can't do too much.
Right.
I'm on the board of Storytelling Toronto, and we're having a festival in May. And the year before, I did like 5 shows at the festival. I only applied for 2, and in fact, I told the festival director to take me out of 1, because now that I was board chair, I didn't want people to think that I got it because of who I was and what I did.
Right.
And for somebody who spends a lot of time out there, I'm kind of humble. And it's like I was being introduced at a storytelling show at Ottawa Sunday night. It's very funny because Sunday night there's a service you do at a house of prayer during the time of mourning.
Right.
And the rabbi wasn't showing up, so I did it with the deceased sister I'm not great at Hebrew, but I know that prayer
Right.
off by heart because after my dad died when I was 14, I went every morning for like 6 months before going to grade 9. And when you go to morning services at the synagogue, there's a little brunch afterwards, but also there's these old men drinking booze, and you have to. And I'm taking shots before going to first year. And that's why I didn't do well in junior high. So anyway, I finish that and I rush up and I go online and do this show out of Ottawa. And this woman's introducing me, and I just cut her off. I went, don't get their expectations up. Just say
Right.
2 things and let me go, And I was also following a really, really sentimental story. And I'm doing much more of a fun story about, trying how important it was for friendship and getting in a boxing ring with this guy
Right.
to prove that I wanted to be his friend. And my boxing career ended at 0-1, a technical knockout in the third. So I don't need that. I
Right.
mean, I got a note from Charlie congratulating me on getting the Arbor Award. I went, what? And they had sent something to the wrong address, and they finally told me. It's like, okay, I got the Arbor. I mean, for the Acadie Award, I was telling people the other night, I brought my mother to it, and I didn't tell her in advance, and
Right.
the principal comes over and says, "You must be proud of your son for winning the award." She goes, "What award?" And she was PO'd that I didn't tell her in advance. So, but I finished after third year because of the opera, but I tell people I got $1,000 to get out of Innis. Here's $1,000. You got the Acadie Award. Get out.
Right.
But as I said, for that first 5-6 years, I was always back. I think I was doing some writing even after I graduated, telling people, don't go to class.
Well, it's been lovely listening to you. I have one final question for you.
Okay.
And are there any Innis events or things, maybe any traditions that we could possibly revive that you think have gotten lost over the years?
One of the greatest, and I think I started it. It was called the Innis Nummies game, Nummies.
Uh-huh.
And the women's hockey team was much stronger than the men's, I think. And the idea was at the end of the season, we would rent Varsity Arena. And the women's hockey team would play against very poorly athletic guys. We'd change goalies. And we had a potty when one cannot go to a washroom, what they use in a porcelain potty thing.
Right.
And that was engraved, and that was the cup for the winning team.
Wonderful.
The rule was, if you were a numbie, the game usually happened like 5 or 6, and we'd go out afterwards. If you were a numbie, you had to start indulging at 1 o'clock. So when you hit the ice, you were maybe a little hungover or altered. And we also included some staff members, and I don't know if Andre Bennett is still alive and kicking. And I remember him on the bench with a joint, passing it around and offering it to Pat, who was one of the registrars, who was very old and very staid. And I played for 2 years, and the rule was if you scored a goal, you could never play the year after. And I came out of the penalty box, and I scored a goal, and that was my last year. But it ran for at least 5 years, and it used to be in the trophy case. Mm-hmm. We had a trophy case. In the middle of the trophy case is this white potty thing.
I mean, the idea for this episode, as I mentioned, started with me going down the rabbit hole and looking at these old issues of the Herald. I hope maybe 50, 60 years down the line, someone is looking back and hearing this podcast recording, or perhaps reading the issues that we're putting out and reminiscing in the same way.
As my Aunt Sheila would say, from your mouth to God's ears, if you believe in God.
Oh, yeah. So, thank you so much for joining me. And thank you to all our listeners. For the Innis Herald Podcast, I'm Yash Kumar Singhal, signing off.